folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where it is time once again for another structure build. In between other projects, I've been trying to replace these paper and cardstock mock-ups here in Thunder Mesa town, and slowly but surely, we're getting there. So it's time to do that once again. I just have to decide which of these buildings I'm going to work on. Yep. I think it's time to build the Marshal's office. I built this mock-up of the Marshal's office several years ago. It's very closely based on a structure that used to stand at Disneyland in Rainbow Ridge in the Pack Mule Load area. The sign up here says Willard P. Bounds, United States Marshal. Now here's a little Disney trivia for you if you didn't know this. Willard P. Bounds was Walt Disney's father-in-law. Yep, the father of Lillian Disney, maiden name Lillian Bounds. Now, as some of you may know, I recently upgraded the studio workshop with a Flux Beambox laser cutter. And here's a look at some of the laser cut parts that I've created for this build. This is one of the first things I've built using the laser cutter, and I am really excited to get started on this. The parts are, this is some 1/32 inch laser board, some 1/16 inch basswood, and one of my favorite materials to work with, a 16th inch thick illustration board.
Like all of the Rainbow Ridge structures, the Marshal's office is small and quaint, with a scale footprint of just 11 by 12.5 feet. Designing the parts for laser cutting is a big topic, and really beyond the scope of this video. But in a nutshell, my process is to draw plans in Adobe Illustrator, and then break down the individual parts into layers that represent the different building materials to be used. Color coding indicates if materials are to be cut or etched, and a tiny line, just 1/1000th of an inch wide, tells your laser where to do either one. A good working knowledge of available materials and their properties is a handy thing to have, as well as a willingness to experiment. You need to pay attention to the various thicknesses of your materials and how that translates into the scale you're working in, and you need to know the proper settings on your machine's software to cut or etch these materials. If it all sounds rather complicated, it is, but once you get the hang of it, the laser cutter is a huge time saver for creating precise and even ornate designs. I'm still learning the ins and outs of my machine, but I can tell you that on this project, it cut the build time down from what would have been a week or more to just a couple of days, and the results are better.
I think the first thing I want to do is put together the illustration board parts, which will make up the inner core of the structure. Before I get too much further, I want to prime and paint all of these laser cut pieces. You especially want to prime this basswood. This is 16th inch thick basswood, and if you don't prime it with a nice non-water based, i.e. enamel primer, it tends to warp pretty bad. So I'm going to prime all these pieces first, and then we'll get to building. Now for some of the windows, I'll be using these Grantline S-Scale 6/6 double hung windows. I had them on hand. They're just the right size and saves me some time with the laser and with construction.
I also decided it would be a good idea to build most of the cornice before painting, assembling the 1/32 laser board and 1/16 basswood parts so all sides could be painted in one pass.
All right, while that primer is drying, I'll use my watercolors, some burnt sienna and cobalt blue mixed together to paint this illustration board back here. Actually stain it, give it the look of old and weathered wood. A nice gray there from mixing those two colors together. This won't really be that visible, but I'll know it's there. And it should look like weathered wood.
After the spray-on primer had dried, I used gold and acrylic paint in my airbrush to add color to the outer basswood walls. It took a couple of coats to get good coverage.
Okay, for the white trim, I'm using Vallejo white, just pure white. Goes on equally well with an airbrush or a paintbrush. So, do all these parts first. Probably going to take a couple of coats at least. Okay. Now that the white parts are all white and the yellow parts are all yellow, I can get on with putting this thing together. And the first piece that needs to be installed is this upper section of the front wall right there. Because everything else keys into that. To do that, I'm just going to use some diluted carpenter's glue, brush it on. Ooh, that was a little bit more than I wanted, and clamp it into place. Now, while I wait for that to dry, I can start putting this front entryway together. See, these are both cut from 1/32 inch thick laser board. This is a 16th inch thick laser board, so when you stack one of these on top of the other, it becomes the same thickness as the upper part of the wall. Now, before I glue this front entryway into place, I need to glaze all the windows and doors, and I've got some clear acrylic sheet to do that. Cut that to size, glue it on with a little Eileen's tacky glue, just a few dabs, and put that in place right there.
In addition to the glazing, I also added blinds to the back of the windows, made from green construction paper.
All right, now I can glaze and install the Grant Line windows next. Just have to find the right size. It looks about right, just like that. All right.
For the upper story window, I used white crepe paper to add some lacy curtains to the interior.
right, now I can start working on the trim. Build the cornice up on top here. That's about ready to install. Oh, but first, I need to put the back wall on. Let's do that. This laser cut entryway is pretty ornate, but it actually doesn't quite have all of the intricate molding on it that the prototype had. So I'm going to go in with some strip wood, different sizes, and try to recreate a lot of that molding. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to finish out this front and then trim it off. Okay, I think it's time for a roof.
Applying a little yellow glue to the rafters, I cemented the laser-cut 1/32 inch plywood roof panels into place. Then, I shingled the roof with some Crescent Creek peel and stick cedar shingles that were left over from an earlier project. A small square of 1/32 inch laser board was glued into place among the shingles to act as flashing for the smoke jack. Then I used some watercolors to add a little variation to random shingles.
I had to do a couple of things off camera because my camera battery died and I had to take, and I didn't know it, and I had to take some time to recharge it. But anyway, let me show you what I did. Down here around the base of the structure, I've added some cribbing, I guess, made from good old coffee stir sticks stained with that India ink and alcohol mixture. This will not even be visible for the most part on the layout, but you know, once again, I'll know it's there. So this is what rises it up to the level of the boardwalk. And the other thing, which is really interesting, I think, is I built this interior set so that it looks, when you look, you know, underneath the blinds there, that there's something of an interior on the inside. And ironically, this is very similar to the way the Rainbow Ridge structures are. If you look closely at Disneyland when you're in line for Big Thunder, they're not very deep at all, and you can see the back wall, and it's just a few posters and a little decor. Anyway, I put in some wainscoting and a couple of wanted posters. We've got a poster here for Billy the Kid, one for Butch Cassidy, and one for Wile E. Coyote, just to round things out. And I added a 3mm yellow LED. And how this is going to work is this part stays on the layout, and then the structure basically just plugs right in on top like that. So I can lift it out and move it if I need to. So without any further ado, got a few more final details to add. Now, when it comes to the front porch awning, I've decided to deviate from the prototype just a little bit. On the original, it had these porch posts like this, but I thought they blocked too much of the lovely front entryway that I worked so hard on. So I have devised a bracket system. So we'll have a couple of decorative Victorian brackets on each side, which are laser cut, and that will hold up the porch roof.
I built the porch roof from some laser cut 1/32 inch plywood with O-scale 2x4s for the rafters. This was shingled just like the main roof and glued into place with the Victorian brackets. Then I turned my attention to the smoke jack. It's a white metal casting from Wiseman Model Services that I cemented into place with cyanoacrylite, kicked and strengthened with just a little baking soda.
Now while the CAA dries completely on the smoke jack here, I'm going to go ahead and put together the Marshal's office sign. Some graphic I created in Photoshop to match some photos I'd seen from historic Rainbow Ridge. And I have a laser cut sign board and border and a couple of tiny little brackets that we're going to use to put this thing on the roof. First, I need to cut this out as carefully and as accurately as I can. Take some yellow glue, dilute this carpenter's glue down just a little bit, so we can brush it on the signboard. You want a perfect, even coating, at least as perfect as you can get. Make sure it's all the way to all the corners. And then, ever so carefully, we put our sign on the signboard. I usually like to match up the top corner first. Okay. Now what's really going to make this work is this, oops, tiny little laser cut border. This is cut out of some 20 thou laser board, which is right around an inch thick in O-scale. Our brackets on here. I need a magnifying glass to see these guys. On each side ought to do it. Well, there's one very important detail I almost forgot. The doorknob. So the marshal can get into the marshal's office. I'm just going to drill a hole here. Put in a old HO track nail to act as a doorknob. Now for final detail, at least for now, the sign. Down here on the bottom. I think that'll work. Now just some final touch up with the white and a little weathering, and we'll put it on the layout. has come to Thunder Mesa. Well, looks right at home there. Gotta say I'm pretty pleased with that. Let's see if the lights work. Well, that, my friends, was a thoroughly enjoyable project. I hope you had fun following along too. I can already tell this laser is going to make a huge difference here in Thunder Mesa town. But that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Adios for now.